mountain.
Welcome to the Pride Perspectives radio show. My name is Rob Darrow. My pronouns are he, him, and his. We are talking tonight about Harvey Milk and the LGBTQ plus history in Santa Cruz County with Curt Keyer and Patrick Meyer. Our Pride Perspectives radio show is here on KSQD every other Sunday from 5 to 6. You can find all the recordings and updates on the Santa Cruz Pride website, santacruzpride.org, as well as the KSQD website. And we've been archiving all of our shows on podcasts. So wherever you find your podcast, check out Pride Perspectives, and you can hear our shows as you're driving to work anytime during the week. Tonight, I'm excited that we have a guest co-host tonight, my friend and fellow Pride board member, Curt Keyer. How's it going, Curt?
I'm doing well. Hi, folks. I'm Curt, he, him, and I'll be trying to take the place of Cece tonight if that's possible. Our show is guided by the following beliefs. We believe that the Santa Cruz County is thriving partly because of the contributions of the LGBTQ plus people, and the LGBTQ plus people in Santa Cruz County are thriving because of the broader Santa Cruz County. We also believe, in the words of the Jewish poet Emma Lazarus, that none of us are free until all of us are free.
On this show, you will hear us refer to queer history and LGBTQ plus history. For us, these terms are interchangeable and refer to people who identify as lesbian, gay, bisexual, transgender, anywhere on the gender identity spectrum, and who they are attracted to. All are welcome to be part of this radio show. April was an awesome month. We celebrated the arts across Santa Cruz County with the Ripple Effects Art Festival, as well as a celebration by the city of Santa Cruz in the arts for the month of April. On our last radio show, we had some wonderful queer artists, Melissa Marzan and Paul Richmond. Melissa's known as the Letter Mermaid, and she shared her passion for murals and for lettering. She, to us, is famous for the Santa Cruz Pride utility box that you can find at the Riverside Avenue Bridge called Be Radical. And Melissa's also working on the Ocean Street entrance to the city of Santa Cruz that should be finished and done by November. So keep your eye out for that as you come off the freeway on Ocean Street. They're redoing that whole entrance to welcome people to Santa Cruz and Santa Cruz County, and Melissa's part of designing that with her incredible artistic abilities.
Rob, do you happen to know what that's going to look like? Is it going to be an arch over the whole street?
An arch? No, it's not arch over the street. If you look at, if you go over there at the opening, there's a fence around the area where they're going to put it in.
Oh.
But there's lettering, and then there's another art. So Melissa's doing the lettering part, and another artist is doing some of the sculptures that are going to go in there. So
will there be a reference to LGBTQ plus?
I don't know if there will be or not.
Okay.
But it'll be something to look at.
Yeah,
for
I'm
sure.
looking forward to it.
Yeah. The other person we had on our last show is Paul Richmond, who is a Monterey-based painter of portraits and many other types of art. Paul is just an incredible painter that has freely shared his art in so many ways. He's been doing art for a living since he was a kid. He's a passionate advocate for social justice, arts education, and LGBTQ plus rights. In Santa Cruz, he's currently offering art lessons at Santa Cruz for teens and adults in the Santa Cruz Art Lab on Tuesday evenings. Curt, have you ever done painting yourself?
No.
No, yeah.
No, I haven't.
Me neither.
No?
I know good art when you see it, right?
Right. Stick figures. That's about it for
Exactly. And we in Santa Cruz Pride deal with our marketing materials and know when it looks good, but we're happy to have other people do that for us, right?
Thank goodness they do it.
Yeah, exactly. So our show tonight, again, I was just reflecting on our past shows, and tonight we're going to be talking a little bit later with Curt and with Patrick Meyer about our new LGBTQ plus history exhibit at London Nelson Center. But before we do that, I wanted to provide a little history about Harvey Milk and the raising of the rainbow flag. And the reason for that is the Santa Cruz County Office of Education will be hosting their 6th annual rainbow flag raising on Tuesday, May 5th at 10 o'clock to celebrate Harvey Milk's birthday, which takes place on May 22nd. The Santa Cruz County Office of Education is just the second county office in the state of California to raise the rainbow flag every year for the month of May. We look forward to hearing about how other county offices in California do the same to also celebrate Harvey Milk and to raise the rainbow flag in celebration of the LGBTQ plus community that exists throughout the state and throughout Santa Cruz County. Also throughout Santa Cruz County, our school districts will be having different ceremonies in celebration of Harvey Milk's birthday as well. You might be interested to know that the reason we are doing that is because of a law that was passed back in 2009 and signed by Governor Arnold Schwarzenegger. It designates May 22nd as a day of significance for school districts and teachers in California. If you're a teacher, check out the Santa Cruz County Office of Education website where you can find lessons about Harvey Milk and books to read during the month of May. Now, you may wonder why Harvey Milk was important and his connection to Santa Cruz. In the developing years of LGBTQ plus life in Santa Cruz County in the 1970s, there were many people who would go back and forth between Santa Cruz and San Francisco. We know that the first San Francisco Pride event in San Francisco took place in 1970, the year after Stonewall, and that the first Santa Cruz Pride event was in 1975, and that caused lots of people to meet each other publicly for the first time. In addition, LGBTQ plus people in Santa Cruz interacted with Harvey Milk in a variety of ways and were very aware of what he was doing in San Francisco. Harvey was elected to the San Francisco Board of Supervisors in 1977, and in 1978 he helped defeat the Briggs Initiative, a statewide ballot initiative that would have banned LGBTQ plus people from being teachers. Curt, were you aware of Harvey Milk or the Briggs Initiative or any of those things?
Yeah, I definitely was aware of them. Even though I was down living in Brookdale at that time here in Santa Cruz County, I was living with a school teacher, a high school teacher, who was literally just freaking out over the whole Briggs Initiative and sweating bullets over it. He was so concerned about his career as a young teacher, and sadly, ultimately decided to stop being a teacher because he just couldn't handle the stress of just the idea that people would even bring this up for a vote. It was just, he found it so frightening to him in his career.
And so you were out in Santa Cruz in those days, so people must have been talking a lot about the Briggs Initiative and things like that.
Yeah, it was on the lips of everybody. When we'd see them in bars or on the street, we'd all talk about it amongst ourselves.
And be worried about it. The great part was that Briggs Initiative was defeated partially by the No on Briggs Initiative people in Santa Cruz. And Harvey Milk actually came to Santa Cruz in January of 1978. There was a small article that I found in the Santa Cruz Sentinel on page 33, dated Wednesday, January 25th, 1978, and it announced, Harvey Milk to speak. Harvey Milk, said to be California's first openly gay supervisor, will speak at a meeting of the Santa Cruz Gay Coalition on Sunday, January 29th at 1:30 at the YWCA. Do you remember the YWCA, Curt, or any meetings there?
Yeah, I do. It was a really nice little meeting place upstairs, is where I think of. It's going upstairs there.
And was that like on Center Street, downtown Santa Cruz, in that area?
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So that was another meeting area for LGBTQ plus people for a variety of meetings. The people in Santa Cruz and across the state, as I mentioned, defeated the Briggs Initiative in November 1978, and then Harvey Milk was assassinated on November 27, 1978. Prior to being assassinated, Harvey had reached out to his friend Gilbert Baker to ask him to figure out an enduring symbol for the LGBTQ plus community. Gilbert was a seamstress and then created the rainbow flag, which was first flown at the San Francisco Pride Gathering in 1978. In those days, it was called the Gay Freedom Day Parade in San Francisco. The second time that rainbow flag was flown was at Harvey Milk's funeral on November 1978. Do you recall hearing about that, Harvey Milk's assassination around Santa Cruz, or people talking about that?
Oh gosh, yeah, it was devastating. It really was. I mean, he was one of our first heroes, and stood for so much for all of us. And to have him assassinated was just it was a horrible thing. It struck I think all of us deep to the core.
Yeah, so that strong connection between people in Santa Cruz and San Francisco could be felt during that time for sure. Dan White was the disgruntled former San Francisco supervisor who assassinated Harvey Milk and George Moscone. He faced trials for his actions in 1979. And when the courts decided on his punishment, it was a very light sentence, which caused protesting in the streets in San Francisco that came to be known as the White Night Riots, the night of May 21st, 1979, after the decision of the court. There were people in Santa Cruz who joined and participated in the White Night Riots as well. And I think when we talk to Patrick a little later, he can tell us a little bit more about that. All this to say that there continues to be a strong connection between the LGBTQ plus communities in San Francisco and Santa Cruz. Also, the other thing to know is that raising the rainbow flag has become a celebration of the LGBTQ plus culture. And one of the reasons we see the rainbow flag raising ceremonies in our Santa Cruz schools in May each year, and then also in June for Pride Month. And Curt, at your house, you always decorate the outside with rainbow flags and stuff.
Yeah, we like to kind of be out there with our queer identity on the block.
How many years have you been doing that?
I don't know, but it's been a while.
A long time, yeah.
It's always been important to us to kind of make our presence known.
So we're glad that you're here tonight. The opening of this week, the London Nelson Center is opening the exhibit called Out of the Closet and Into the Streets, 50 plus years of LGBTQ plus history in Santa Cruz County, put together by our friend Pat Dellon, who will be on our next radio show. But tonight we wanted to talk to Curt and to Patrick Meyer about their experiences in the history. And for those of you who are listening, you are all welcome to come to London Nelson Center on May 7th at 5 o'clock to listen to various dignitaries, including our Senator John Laird, our Supervisor Monica Martinez, our Supervisor Justin Cummings, our local city councilman Scott Newsom, and many others will be there to talk about the importance of LGBTQ plus history. But first, we're going to talk to Curt a little bit about what his lived experience in Santa Cruz County. So again, it's good to have you here tonight. Could you start a little bit about sharing where you grew up and that sort of thing?
Sure. Well, I grew up over the hill in Sunnyvale, and that was in the 60s. I'm 74 now. So it was before Stonewall, of course, and I had been outed by a friend of mine and during high school, and so it felt like the worst thing that could happen to me. And I decided that as soon as I graduated from high school, I was going to come out because I just didn't want that secret to be somewhere lurking around behind me for somebody else to tell. So I came out and really felt like this was an important thing for me to do. And at the time, I think maybe even more so than now. I mean, coming out was a new thing. So
you can still remember being outed in high school, huh?
You don't forget that.
Could you talk a little bit more about who found out and how that happened, or not how it happened?
Well, I had been fooling around after school with one of my classmates, and he told our friends.
Oh.
So
did they in turn tell your family?
No, they didn't tell my family.
So they just kept it within your friends group.
So I think my family didn't know until I came out when I was 18, which was I came out about 2 weeks after high school.
Yeah.
And also I came out partly because it was during the draft for Vietnam, and I felt like as a queer boy, as much as I didn't want to go to Vietnam and fight, I didn't think I could handle being in that heterosexual environment. Mm-hmm. I really felt that would be harder for me than being in the trenches of Vietnam, or as hard anyway. So I went to a psychiatrist, and a couple weeks after high school, and got her to write a letter for me saying that I was gay or homosexual, and so that I could present that to the draft board because that would disqualify me automatically from serving.
I guess it worked.
Yes, it did. And here I am today.
You know, that coming out experience you described in high school of your friends knowing, but your family not knowing is probably historically true for many people today as well, that within our high schools, our students are aware of who's out and who's not out. And there's kind of this code among young people where you just keep that information to ourselves. And I'm not sure in your day, but certainly today that other students know that it's not okay to out other students. So that's a good thing that hopefully we've grown into.
Yeah, I see it frequently. We think we're living in times that have come a long ways since back then, Stonewall or the 60s or 70s. But the fact is that it is still really hard for many people to come out and tell their families.
Yeah. What kind of work did you do in those days around Santa Cruz?
I was known as Kmart Curt.
Oh!
I worked for 18 years for Kmart, first on 41st, then in Scotts Valley. So I was sort of the greeting committee and kind of, I think people knew I was gay when I was working in my little department in the garden shop at Kmart. And I met a lot of people that way, just
hanging out in the garden shop.
Hanging out in the garden shop, and I just kind of, in that subtle way that we do, recognizing each other as queer people.
And did your involvement in that garden shop lead to the gardening that you enjoy today? Or?
In part, yeah. In large part, yeah. Although I always liked to garden, but but it did.
I mean, yeah, having been at your house many times, you've always got new flowers growing for sure. The other thing I know you were involved in a variety of gay men's groups over the years, but one of the things, so as people know, I came out later in life, and I moved back to Santa Cruz like 15 years ago and realized I was gay at that point. And as I met other gay people, they would talk about the parties at Curt and Mo's house, but I kept saying I never got an invitation, so I didn't feel like I could go. Until finally I realized that the parties at your house were open to everybody and how welcoming that was. But I'm curious how that idea of having people at your house started, and can you mark a certain year when it started or an event that caused you to just keep the gay men's community alive?
The inspiration for me was the parties that two fellows in Scotts Valley used to have, named Bob and Tim, at their home, and they were called the Pig Outs. And these two were really, I've never achieved what they achieved in terms of the frequency and the grandeur of their parties. But it was a role model for me. And at some point, I guess it was in not till the early 90s did we start having parties. And partly because I hooked up with Maurice Carrillo, and Maurice is Mr. Party. And long before he ever met me, long before he even came out, he was just a person who brought people together at his home for big, extravagant events with themes and everything else. And so when we met each other, it became kind of a synchronicity of the two of us. And what I found was it was really hard to invite one person without inviting somebody else. And so we decided that the party should just be for anybody that wanted to come.
Do you remember like the very first party that you had? Or what caused that first party?
The first party was, I'm a devotee of a Peruvian singer named Ima Sumac, and she was scheduled to play the Catalyst. She canceled at the last minute. And we decided to have a performance party in her honor. And so we invited anybody that wanted to come and perform lip syncing to Ima Sumac. And that was kind of our first big party.
One. Now, did you build that big elaborate stage that particular year?
We built a less elaborate stage. We had a little stage for it, yeah.
Yeah, because I've heard about those stories every year.
And they just grew and grew. And,
Because then that grew into other ongoing parties. I know for many years, New Year's Eve was famous at your house.
Right, Christmas and all that stuff, yeah. Well, Maurice was such a decorator that it seemed a shame for us to sit at home with all these decorations in our home and watch Golden Girls.
Right.
With no one else there, so.
Another gay icon. So that's how it developed. I mean, because it seemed like, again, I'm talking to people in the past who would go to your parties, that it was almost like once a month you'd have something. Was that how it was?
That might be
a little over exaggeration.
An exaggeration.
Okay.
Yeah. But you know what I will say is that Maurice, because of his community in Watsonville around the Filipino community, and me with the importance I place on bringing gay people together, queer people together. We both really wanted to create environments where people could meet each other outside of bars, outside of the internet, and actually have face-to-face contact with people.
And I mean, you accomplished that. I mean, between the two of you, in those days, it seemed like you knew everybody who was gay in the community.
Well, we like to think so. But I think that might have been...
I know as I attend parties at your house now, when I go and see new people, we get excited about new people, right? I know that one of the wonderful traits that you have is you always find that new person, whether it's at volleyball or at your house, and you always intentionally go over and talk to them and make them feel welcome.
Well, I think a lot of us growing up queer felt isolated. I know I did. I was a very lonely kid. And when I came out, things got better for me. But I've always had a strong feeling for the people who sit on the sidelines and no one comes up and talks to them. In fact, it's kind of a complaint I have sometimes with other people that here's this person sitting alone in the room. Why aren't you going over and introducing yourself?
Yeah.
And it's been that way actually before the internet too. It's just, I think people's shyness, I don't know what it is, but to me it seems important to make people feel welcome. Well,
between you and Maurice, you've both done a great job of making many people feel welcome throughout Santa Cruz County. So on behalf of all of us, thank you for all that you continue to do. I know you still do that with the volleyball group at least once a month as well. So that's pretty exciting. So we're going to take a short break and then talk with Patrick, Meyer, and Curt about some of the early years in LGBTQ plus history and how they got arrested at one point. You're listening to the Pride Perspectives radio show on KSQD 90.7 FM, 89.7 FM, and KSQD 89.7 Prunedale, serving the counties of Santa Cruz and Monterey. And we'll be right back. Welcome back to the Pride Perspectives radio show here on KSQD. My name is Rob Darrow, and my co-host today is Curt Keyer. My
Boom,
co-host today is
shakalaka.
Curt Keyer.
I want to take you higher.
Take her higher with Curt Keyer. Oh my gosh, all the names we could rhyme with you. Have you had music written about you? Or poems? Oh, we don't want to go into that. Never mind.
I hope not.
Our topic today is Harvey Milk on LGBTQ plus history in Santa Cruz County with Curt and Patrick Meyer. Patrick, how are you doing?
Wonderful introduction.
We're glad you're here, Patrick. We want to give you a chance to share a little bit about yourself, where you grew up, and how you ended up in Santa Cruz.
Oh, well, actually, I came to Santa Cruz when I was 6 weeks old, but the story is a little bigger than that. My family we grew up essentially in Stockton, but my parents really loved Santa Cruz. My mom grew up also in Stockton. We'd come down every summer. My great aunt bought a house in Seabright, and we came every summer. And we literally would go the day school let out, and we'd come back the night before school started.
You spent your whole summer in Santa Cruz.
Absolutely. It was so wonderful. We lived, near Seabright Beach, and so we would, the rule was that we either had to go to summer school or to swimming lessons at Harvey West to, I guess, get us out of the house in the morning. But then we'd come home for lunch, and we would just walk down to Seabright Beach and spend the rest of the day down there. That was our life, and it was really wonderful as I look back on it.
The funny part of you talking about swim lessons at Harvey West Park is that you and I could have been in the same class doing swim lesson at Harvey West. Yeah.
Yeah, and I also took lessons from that woman over in Pleasure Point.
Uh-huh.
That some people talk about when they talk about the history of Santa Cruz and so forth. But so Santa Cruz has always been, a really special place in my heart. And as a matter of fact, at many points over the years, all of my 6 siblings, or my 5 siblings, have lived in Santa Cruz at the same time. At this point, there's 4 of us, but even the ones that are away have a place here in Santa Cruz. So it's a family thing as well. I went to college at Humboldt State. I was an English and psychology major, and when I finished my BA and got a teaching credential, I went across country in my Volkswagen van, a camper van from the factory with all the bells and whistles, and I came back and settled in Santa Cruz at the Seabright House and lived there for most of the period when I was first coming out. When my parents would come down for the summer, John Laird invited me to come stay at his house, and we spent the summer there, which was really fun. After that, I actually moved around the corner from our Seabright house to East Cliff and lived right above the river mouth. That was very fun as well.
All great places. Can you talk a little bit about how you came out the first time, or living in Santa Cruz, what that experience was
sure.
like?
Yeah, I think it's difficult for people to understand that at the time that Curt and I were, in high school, it was super scary to come out. I mean, it was like the I don't know, you would want to die rather than come out, and here's a good example of that. When I registered for the draft, there was absolutely no way that I was going to come out as a way of avoiding going to Vietnam. It was, and you think back on that now, and it's like, really? It's so different. The information that I was getting as a kid growing up and in high school, and I should add that I went to a Catholic high school, so
I'm sure that helped your coming out experience.
Exactly. But the only place I could get information really was at the library, and the books that I found all were psychoanalytically leaning and really labeled homosexuality as an illness, and consequently, needed to be treated. Which is actually how my parents reacted when they found out when I came out. But my coming out in Santa Cruz was, I'd gone across country really trying to find myself and begin experimenting in that realm, even though I had, had clandestine encounters with friends from college and even some friends from high school. But it was all a secret. And let's see, when I first got to back into Santa Cruz, I wanted to connect with the community, and one of the places I ended up getting involved in was Men Against Rape. There was Women Against Rape and Men Against Rape, and it was a progressive group of men who met often at someone's house, but we did different events, including events at the YWCA, which, by the way, formerly was a perfume factory originally.
Perfume factory?
A perfume factory,
oh,
yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. Now it's the home of the Walnut Avenue Women and Families Center, and they do really great work with women and families who are survivors of domestic abuse. And I want to
that space has been a great service for a lot of people for a lot of years.
Well, yes, it certainly has. I remember during that period, I wasn't out yet, but I did an evening on Father's Day for men to come and talk about their relationships with their fathers. This is before the men's group started and before I was really out. But coming out was an interesting process. I had some friends that were gay, and I got involved in different, political campaigns around elections. So I was surrounded by progressive people. But I found out about a teacher that was teaching up at UCSC, and Alan Sable, and he was teaching the sociology of men. Mm-hmm. Alan Sable was later fired from the university for being gay, essentially.
Right.
Because again, I need to emphasize, it was like the death knell. It was just terrible. The kinds of
feelings and the way people were treated, all those things, huh?
Yeah, all those things, right. As that during that time, right around that, a little bit later, there were a group of men that were arrested at the Capitola bathrooms, and their names and pictures were published above the fold in the Santa Cruz Sentinel on the front page.
Right.
And that ruined people's careers.
Yeah.
It was really awful.
When you started coming out, about how old were you in Santa Cruz at that point?
I was 23.
Around 23.
22, yeah.
So, go ahead.
And so I went to the sociology of men's class. I thought that'd be a great way to, meet people. And lo and behold, Alan started his first class by saying, I'm going to teach this class from a gay male perspective. You all have never really had that perspective. We're always teaching classes from a heterosexual perspective. And that was like wild, my God. And everybody was so excited. He filled Classroom Unit 1 every week. And in the beginnings, it was a way to meet other men, because it was very difficult to find places to meet people at that point. We were just beginning to develop different vehicles for meeting each other, including, gay bars, and later the gay community bulletin board at Bookshop Santa Cruz, which was a way that a lot of people found out about events happening in town. So each week when they meet, there was a check-in period at the beginning of the class, and periodically people would stand up and said, my announcement is that I am gay, or I am coming out.
All during that class, huh?
Yeah, over and over and over again, people came out, both gay men and lesbians at that point. Mm-hmm. And it was really exciting. And that's where I met my friend Mark Small, who unfortunately has passed away, who was also became a psychologist. He worked at Bookshop Santa Cruz, and he eventually went to Bali, and he started really the kind of gay men's trekking to Bali kind of period. There were many of us that went to Bali at some point or another, following in his footsteps. He was a real loss to the community, but that's where I really came out.
Great.
And my biggest point at coming out that I can remember is that I made a decision, and it was I was invited to go to a wedding of my close friends from the dorms from Humboldt, and it was on the same day as the Gay Freedom Day parade
in San Francisco. Yeah.
And I chose to go there instead of going to the wedding.
Oh.
And it was an incredible experience. It just opened my eyes to the variety of kinds of people who were gay, because we didn't know. It was, and in Santa Cruz, we didn't have a gay neighborhood, so there wasn't like a place that we could go to. So it was the parade in San Francisco and the parade in Santa Cruz were just amazing places where we began to make connections with each other.
Yeah, Kurt and I were talking earlier about the ways that people communicated in those days, and you named a couple of them. I hadn't thought about the public library, but that's always been a safe space for lots of people. Bookshop
Yeah.
Santa Cruz. You talked about taking classes at UC Santa Cruz. I've heard that from other people.
Oh,
you mentioned
yes,
the bars.
Right.
And then
And
Kurt,
also-
go ahead.
Also, there were two different coffee houses up at Santa Cruz, at UCSC, the Stevenson Idler and the, or was it the Kresge Idler? Anyway, Stevenson and Kresge both had coffee shops that were kind of notorious for where gay people hung out. So, sometimes people here in town would go up there just, to have a cup of coffee and potentially meet somebody.
Yeah, and Kurt, just to bring you in this part of the conversation, you were living up in Boulder Creek, you said. Brookdale. Yeah. And as you heard information about Harvey Milk or other things going on, where would those conversations take place?
Well, I remember hearing about it on the news and, kind of staying glued to the news at that point.
Yeah, the television news, the 3 channels.
Yeah, right.
And the Santa Cruz Sentinel, or would you get a newspaper in those days?
I can't remember now if we subscribed or not, but I think it was on the news. I think television and radio.
Yeah. It was in the news. But also Bookshop Santa Cruz had the Boston Gay Community News there, and RFD, which was a magazine for rural gay men, RFD being Rural Faggot Delivery, and Women's Magazine from Boston, I think it was as well. So, it was a source of information.
That the bookshop certainly served that safe space for lots of LGBTQ plus people.
Sure, it was that, and then the Cafe Pergolese, which was right behind the bookshop at the time.
Do you remember those, Kurt?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Yes.
So let's move it. So you both were living in Santa Cruz during that time, and at some point, in some way, a bunch of you guys got together and started this men's group in 1978. Can you talk a little bit about how that started or why it started?
Sure. Well, we were going to bars and it was fun and dandy, and I was meeting people. We were, the community was beginning to coalesce, but I really wanted to meet men and talk to them about their lives and, how they were dealing with this identity at a time when it was really dangerous to come out. And we didn't, as I said before, have a neighborhood for it. And I talked to Jerry Solomon, who was a psychologist at the time, about that. And he put me in touch with Ken Sentner, who was a marriage and family therapist. And I proposed the idea of doing a group. And so Ken, I was really glad Ken wanted to do this because he had the clinical background. At that point, I hadn't gone to graduate school to become a psychotherapist myself. We ended up meeting the first time in at the YWCA in the upstairs kind of big room.
That YWCA. Okay.
Yeah. And in that group, as we assessed what people really wanted, half the people wanted just like a drop-in group that they could come to once in a while, and the other half wanted a kind of like ongoing closed support group. So one group spun off and did their ongoing support group, and then we began doing the men's group. And we started at first at the London Nelson Center in one of the former classrooms, so a smaller room. But people kept coming. Men just kept showing up. They were finding out about it, through some signage that we put up all around town and things like that, and word of mouth, of course. And eventually we had to move to the multipurpose room, which is different than it is now at the Loudon Nelson Center or London Nelson Center. I keep having to change that.
Right.
But by within 3 months of our doing this group, we were averaging 90 men a night coming to these groups, and that 90 men showing up for everyone was just so hungry for information. And we talked about a lot of different kinds of things. We talked about coming out. We talked about relationships with family. We talked about relationships in general. We had public health officers come and talk about STDs and just general men's health. We had different people coming in and doing different presentations. And we would do some small group talking, and then we would have a break, and then we would do a large group and kind of summarize what really had gone on. So it was like a workshop every Monday.
And every Monday, that's why I wondered, and was it, so it would last, about 2 hours each Monday evening?
Yeah, about 2.5 hours, actually,
okay.
Because people like to stick around and talk.
And hang out.
Yeah, exactly.
And Curt, I know that you were part of that in those early days. What do you remember from it?
Well, I remember attending some of them, and then I got really involved when Patrick decided that it was time for him to move on and do other things. And some of us were, of course, like, oh my gosh, what are we going to do? We need this thing, because it had really become an important piece of the social fabric here in Santa Cruz for gay men. And so I, along with the great Morgani, Frank Lima, and a couple other people, kind of as a small group of guys, took it over and kept the show going. It was not a show, but it was a
yeah.
It was honestly, I think, under your tutelage, Patrick, it had a little bit more focus than it did with us. But what it became was a regular place where we could come and feel kind of like as family with each other and grow friendships and support each other. It was an important thing.
The other thing, too, was that we had all these spin-offs from the group. And one was the volleyball that met on Wednesdays and still does. And Curt was a big part of that. Were you I think you were one of the facilitators of that happening.
Honestly, I'd like to take credit for that, but I was not one of the people that started volleyball. I joined in soon after that, but yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
I know John Laird was a big part of that for sure.
Yeah, he was.
But
definitely.
so you had 90 gay men showing up every Monday, you'd bring in a topic and you'd have small group discussions, maybe a speaker, and then it caused people to interact with each other.
Absolutely. And sometimes we would do nonverbal kinds of things, activities. But the idea was to have a healthy conversation, if you will, about things that affected our lives, not just being gay, but things that affected our lives. The pattern that I was able to perceive from the group was that men would come initially and they would get so turned on by it, and they would come back, over and over again for about 3 months, and then ever so gradually they would, sometimes not go, sometimes come, and other new men would come in. So it's hard to believe how many gay men there were in Santa Cruz, and we didn't know that. We had no idea. There were small, groups of men that were kind of like affinity groups or friendship groups, but it wasn't until the men's group, the expansion of a couple of gay bars, and the Briggs Initiative really that brought us out as a community.
What were there other spin-offs? You talked about gay men's volleyball. What were some of the other spin-offs of that group?
There was a Spanish-speaking potluck, where men would get together and only speak in Spanish to hone their Spanish skills. There was a Scrabble group. There were some professionals that kind of did a little professional thing, and then of course the FDC, the Freedom Democratic Caucus, the first of our political gay and lesbian political organizations. That's what we called it at that point, not LGBTQ plus. But it was the men's group and many men in the group were wanted to be active politically and to carry on the political movement that we saw growing from the Briggs Initiative. When that passed, it was a real marker of a change in attitude.
So how were women involved in all of this? I mean, did they have like their own group that met, or were they part of the Freedom Democratic Caucus or these other groups, or how did the different groups interface?
There was the Women's Center, for one.
Oh, the Women's Center was in place. Oh, so were there women's groups there at the Women's Center then, to your knowledge?
Oh, yeah.
Okay.
There were a variety of things going on at the Women's Center. At the time of the Briggs Initiative, the Women's Center was at a place where what is it, Il Posta in Seabright? Restaurant?
Oh, down there. Okay.
Yeah, I can. And, I had a number of lesbian friends. A lot of us did. It was very different than, say, San Francisco, where there seemed to be more of a separation between women's interests and men's interests. The men were in the Castro, the women were in Valencia and the Mission up in San Francisco. But here, there was this sense of cooperation and community that was truly amazing. I had a friend, Judith Kinst, who I did a lot of community organizing with, and that was another way that we would all come together, would be, when there was a campaign like No on 8, or No on 6, pardon me.
Right.
We would do fundraisers for, the campaign, and that would usually be at a gay bar, and we had to get the word out. So we did all of that work with, prepping and doing that, but it wasn't done by just gay men. It was done by lesbians as well. So when we decided to do it really to see how men and women would come together to really extend the power,
the influence, right?
Yeah, the influence. Pardon me, of the gay political movement. The other thing too is as Curt pointed out so well, going back and forth to San Francisco was an integral part of that. That we would go up, for the weekend and or even for the night, and really get involved in the gay community up there. Mm-hmm. And that was an important part of it. And we would bring back the newspapers from there, the Bay Area Reporter, the BAR, and later it came a second one called the Sentinel, and each of those would have listings of different events that were going on. And so, that was also a really helpful way to get the information of what was going on the whole peninsula and in Santa Cruz.
So I just want to take a minute to remind people that we're talking about the 1970s, and the first San Francisco Pride took place in 1970, the Gay Freedom Parade and different events. And then the first Santa Cruz Pride event took place in 1975. And this men's group developed in 1978. Isn't that right, Patrick? 78?
Yeah.
Yeah,
78.
So these were the later 70s when these different groups of people that came together that then resulted in the gay and lesbian community we have today, right?
Well, yes, it really did. It was a very big part of what became a sense of community without ever having a neighborhood to, kind of identify with.
Yeah. The other thing I talked about at the beginning of the show was about Harvey Milk. And again, just to remind people that, he was assassinated in 1978, and Dan White, who's the one who killed Milk, was on trial in 1979. So do you recall any conversations in the men's group about the verdict in that trial, or any response to that with the White Night riots?
Yes, actually. First of all, it was so exciting to have him, Harvey Milk, be an out person, actually being a supervisor. I mean, it just seemed like an amazing thing had happened, that we had, broken ground in the straight community, and and were beginning to gain visibility and so forth.
So you got him elected, and then you defeated the Briggs Initiative. So that all that stuff happened within the same year or a couple of years there,
that's
right?
right.
Okay.
It was a very big year.
Yeah.
And we were having the meeting, actually, when the verdict came out, or the verdict had come out earlier in the day. And we were at a men's group meeting, and someone said they are marching in San Francisco, and they're rioting. And several people just stood up and said, I'm going. And so a whole group of guys from Santa Cruz just left the men's group and drove right up to San Francisco and joined in.
Wow, that's amazing. So the other event I just want to bring forward with the two of you is you were both involved in going to the March on Washington, and Curt at a random conversation said, oh, I got arrested, in one of those marches. So could you two talk a little bit about that event and what caused you to go and what happened?
Well, Patrick, were you there in the one? It was at 87, I think, when they unveiled the quilt and all that stuff. And and I know for me, the motivator was the Supreme Court decision, Michael Hardwick versus the state of, was it Georgia?
Texas. Texas?
Hardwick v. Texas.
Okay, yeah. And the outrage that a person could be arrested in their own home for doing what they wanted sexually with somebody else, I just thought I couldn't sit with that, and I decided to go back to protest that, and so I took part in the protest on the steps of the Supreme Court.
How many other people from Santa Cruz would you say were there protesting with you?
I don't know. Did you protest, Patrick, on that?
Yes, actually, we did. We as a community, both men and women, came together and to talk with the other people that were going, so that we could all make plans to meet up. And we marched as a group, and that was in 1979. October 14th, 1979 was the first one.
Right.
And in that one, we actually did a lobbying day on the Monday after the big march. And I can remember a whole group. I can see the picture in my mind of us going in and talking to Leon Panetta, who was our representative at the time. And we were so scared. We were so unfamiliar, with who we were dealing with and what the response was going to be. And while he was not super supportive, he listened, and he listened to our concerns. So there was that going on as well. So and you're right.
Let's leave that there. And then, so Curt, when you got arrested, what happened?
Well, we had been trained to, how to be arrested in a nonviolent way, and which was really what I thought was going there and being a part of that politicized me in a way that I had never been before, which I thought was great. And it was great for everybody, I think, that attended the march.
I mean, we're all in your 20s or 30s?
I was in my 30s at that time.
Yeah.
And Scott Brookie was there, and I think 700 and something other people got arrested that day.
Wow.
On the steps of the Supreme Court and put in jail. And I remember being very concerned. I wanted to wear a sweatshirt that would show well on the cameras if I were arrested.
Dress for success.
Exactly.
And then how long were you in jail?
This was the interesting thing. To me was I was willing to pay some definite have some consequences from this, but there were none. They arrested us. We stayed in jail for about half the night, but we're let out before morning.
Oh.
Okay. And then I thought, okay, I'll get home and I'll find the warrant for whatever, appear back in court in Washington, D.C. Nothing ever came.
Okay.
So I guess which kind of tells me, at least at that time,
what good protesting can do.
Yeah, and if you're in a big number, maybe the strength in numbers allows you to not be prosecuted.
Yeah. And was it publicized in any way? You being
It was on national news.
You made the national news.
Yeah.
In your 30s.
Yeah.
Wow.
In my pink sweatshirt.
In your pink sweatshirt. That's great. Patrick, do you have a final thought about those particular years, the late 70s, that you wanted to share before I have to close out the show?
Oh, sure. One of the things that later I discovered when I was in graduate school and reading social work journals and all the rest of that is that that there was a model of people coming out, and one of the things that they found was that when you're coming out, people begin to get more energized politically. And I really was excited about that. I mean, I knew that before I ever read it in a journal. I just sensed that, people were so excited about really coming out and discovering themselves as who they truly were. And the men's group really supported that. And many of those men became politically active in ways that they had never been active before.
And that was one of the key points of Harvey Milk as well. So I sure appreciate you taking the time. And Curt, thanks for being our co-host today. Just for everybody, know that May 7th, the opening of our LGBTQ plus exhibit will be at London Nelson at 5 o'clock. Come on out and enjoy that. May 9th is the Queer Youth Leadership Awards. There are tickets on sale now for Santa Cruz Pride's Queerlantis. On June 6th, June 7th will be the annual Pride and Festival. We look forward to seeing you on our next show as we talk more about our LGBTQ plus history. Thanks for joining us tonight. See you next time.
Me, I'm trapped inside my brain. Well,